Hello, everyone, and welcome to PMP Live. My name is Leah, and I'm a bookseller, politics, and prose, and I have the honor, really, of being your host this evening. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in this virtual format, which allows us to continue to bring these amazing authors and their really important books to readers like you. And I am so excited to welcome our very special guest this evening, Brittney Morris, as well as our other special guest, Roseanne Brown, to celebrate the release of Brittney's amazing and important new book, The Cost of Knowing. So beautiful. If you haven't gotten yours, you can click on the link that will drop in the chat box to get your own copies of The Cost of Knowing, and which will include a signed book plate from Brittney. Thank you so much while supplies last, as well as check out Rosie's amazing book, A Song of Race and Ruin. So you can grab that if you haven't already in the chat box. Also, if you have a question for our guest this evening, you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. And at the end of our chat, our guests will have time to answer some of your questions. You can also vote on questions you like and really want answered by clicking the thumbs up button at the bottom as well. And as always, please remember that this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that friends be respectful of one another in their questions and comments. And again, thank you so much, friends, for joining us and supporting these awesome voices. So now on to the event you're all waiting for. It is my honor truly to introduce awesome author Brittney Morris. Brittney is the author of several titles, including Slay, Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, Wings of Fury, and has written for video games like Legends of Redwall and Subnautica Below Zero. Brittney received an economics degree from Boston University, where she was also the founder and former president of Boston University's Creative Writing Club. And tonight we are celebrating the book birthday of her much anticipated release of her newest title, The Cost of Knowing. Yay! And this evening, Brittney is joined by bestselling author Roseanne A. Brown. Roseanne is the author of epic YA fantasy, A Song of Race and Ruin, and the upcoming sequel, A Song of Storms and Silence. Roseanne is a graduate of University of Maryland, where she completed the Jimenez Porter Writers House program. And Rosie's work has also been featured in several outlets, including Voice of America. So now it is my pleasure and honor to pass it over to Brittney and Roseanne. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Leah, for that introduction. Thank you all for being here with us today. And we're all here to celebrate Brittney's book, The Cost of Knowing. Brittney, this is the nicest I'm going to be to you this entire event. So just please enjoy this while it lasts. And before y'all yell at me and Brittney, we've known each other since like 2017, before either of us were agents and authors, before like either of us had sold our debuts or anything. So like we go way back. So basically I have a license to bully her as much as I want. So I'm so excited to be here. I'm so honored, like after all we've been through, like to be here with you on your launch day and to just really kind of dive into this and dive into all this stuff. So we're gonna have a lot of fun. I'm going to expose many of your questionable cartoon opinions. And of course, y'all, please drop those questions in there. We are open books, like publishing, craft, anything you want to know. Y'all want love advice? We'll give you love advice. Are we authorized to do that? No, but we will anyway. So just anything y'all want, just put that in there. But yes, so The Cost of Knowing, y'all. First off, if you haven't got this book, please get this book, because Brittney ruined my life and she needs to be held accountable for it. Like literally when I finished it, I literally DM'd her, like I texted her, I was like, Brittney, I am pantsless and crying because I just got out of the shower, right? And I was reading and like I hadn't gotten changed yet. So I'm just in my towel and I just could not stop reading. And so like I literally finished the book before I'd actually gotten changed. I'm just like, I'm sitting here and I'm not wearing clothes. I'm crying over your book. And I hate you. So this book has just blew me away and just really reached deep inside and like just really hit. I'm going to stop talking about it so I can let the author talk about it. So Brittney, can you please tell us about just The Cost of Knowing and where your inspiration for the book came from?
Absolutely. So I'm very honored to have ruined your life over this book. That's always a career goal of mine, to stress you out. So about The Cost of Knowing and where my inspiration for it came from, weirdly enough, the very first spark that started the story was I had this character stuck in my head and I couldn't get him out of my head. And it was this 16-year-old boy who worked in a toothpaste factory. I had told Curisa this. She was very confused, as you can imagine.
I can imagine that.
And as the toothpaste would come down the conveyor belt, he would see the future of each tube of toothpaste. And I was like, I can't actually turn this into a book. This is the weirdest concept I've ever come up with. I don't know if I haven't been getting enough sleep or if I've been eating weird stuff lately or what, but then I got to thinking, what would happen if you could see the future and you were a Black boy? And how stressful would that be? And then, this was also at the time of like, when, someone was in the news, there was a hashtag going around. There's a recent incident of police brutality. Anxiety was like the talk on the news, especially Black anxiety. And so I got to thinking, like, what would happen? What would be worse, being Black and seeing the future, or being Black and seeing the past? And I realized that we kind of already live with that every day. A lot of us do. Like, if you see on the news, it kind of sounds like they're spelling out our future. Any of us could become a hashtag at any moment. And then every time Black History Month rolls around, we're reminded of the trauma and our past and the struggle and hundreds of years of pain and suffering. And it's like, how are we supposed to be present, and, stay calm and meditate and just be present, and overcome our anxiety if we're constantly reminded of the future and the past? So that was where the inspiration for Alex and Isaiah came from. For those who don't know, the book is about two brothers. One can see into the future, one can see into the past, and everything changes when the older brother sees a vision of his younger brother dying in the next couple of days. So it becomes a race against time to get to the bottom of this 400-year-old family curse and figure out what it means to be a joyful Black boy in the present. So there's some tears, there's some laughs, there's some joy, there's some pain. There's a little bit of everything in this book, and I'm really proud of it and excited to share it with you all.
Gosh, just Alex and Isaiah is my son. I love him so much. And I'm just like, it's so curious because with your debut Slay, you were in the mindset of like a teenage Black girl, which is obviously something you have experience with. At least I assume, who knows, maybe you were born 25, I'll never know. But I assume you have experience being a teenage Black girl. And so
it feels like it was born 65, honestly.
Yeah, I can see that. But sorry, I'm gonna try and get you less. But so going into the mindset this time of a teenage Black boy. So kind of walk me through a little bit, kind of what sort of research you did and kind of like what you think surprised you the most from writing from Alex's POV and getting into his mindset.
Definitely. So, I thought a lot about my brothers as I was writing Alex's character and Isaiah's character. I thought about my dad. I thought about my uncles. I thought about a whole lot of Black men in my life and what I've heard them say, what their experiences are, and what I've heard them say to each other, and just different positive aspects of their masculinity that have been passed down through generations in my family specifically, and also the negative things, and how that manifests and how they share with others. So I really just had to dig deep into my memories and my family's history and just pour myself out onto the page. One thing that I was really inspired to do with this story was showcase the beauty of Black masculinity, because I feel like Slay featured Black women a whole lot, which was fantastic. It was great. It was a party. Loved writing it. Loved reading it. I love sharing it with you all. I could talk about that book for days, but and it even represented. It represented all genders because it represented Blackness worldwide. But it didn't feature specifically very many young Black men who were positive figures. And so I really, really wanted to do that with this book. Celebrate young Black masculinity and reach out to Black men and meet them where they are when talking about mental health, and just making conversations like that accessible for specifically them, and saying, like, I will never understand your struggle personally because I'm not a Black man, but I see it and I recognize that it's unique and that you shouldn't have to bear it alone.
Yes, I feel like that definitely comes through because, like, I think just one of the things that really stood out to me is like Alex, he has lots of different relationships with different people. But obviously the brother is the big one, but he has his girlfriend, Talia. He has his Aunt Mackie. He has Scoop, his employer. He even has his neighbors, the Zacharys. And like just kind of really showing the depths of how like in every relationship he brings, like he's carrying this with him because like this is part of who he is, but it's also not defining him and through all that. So I want to focus a little bit on Talia for a little bit because like obviously the brothers are the focus, but I love their like, you know me, I'm a huge romance. I'm always the person like when Brittney sends me something, I'm like, but can you add more romance? And she'll be like, but Rosie, this is like an apocalyptic horror. But I'm like, but can you add more romance? So like,
she's like, more kissing, more yearning, more of all of that.
It's about the yearning, Brittney. I'm telling you, it's about the longing glances. But anyway,
why did I get a text from you in the middle of the night, like last week, that said, "Can this boy just kiss his girlfriend?" Though I thought you liked the yearning, which is
stressing. It was stressing me out. Okay, well, so tell me a little bit about that, and tell me kind of like how you approach that. Because one thing, like, they obviously Slay itself also featured like a young black couple with Kira and her boyfriend, and so we were featuring another young couple. Talia is not black, but she is another character of color. But like, kind of like how you sort of approach that this time, and like especially flipping it, we're seeing mostly from the boys' point of view, and kind of how you feel what she brought to the story, even without this being like specifically a love story, you know.
Great question. So I knew I couldn't talk about the experiences of young black men without talking about, or at least touching on, the the hypersexuality expected of them oftentimes, which is really sad. And I knew I wanted Alex to be a real character with real flaws and real anxieties, for lack of a better word. So I wanted him to be, I wanted him to grapple with this idea of the world expects me to be more comfortable with sex than I actually am. And Talia, meanwhile, is also kind of a victim of toxic masculinity here, because she's like, oh, I got to be ready just in case he wants to, like, I want to be able to keep up. I don't want to have to, whatever. And Alex is sitting there going, what's wrong with me? Why am I not ready for this yet? Is it, am I broken? Is there a problem? And it's something he grapples with through the whole story. Won't spoil the end too much, but he does grow in that area. So yeah, but I definitely knew I wanted to talk about that. I also love Talia as a character, just personally, because she like takes no nonsense. She reminds me a little bit of Steph in a way.
Yeah, I can.
She's like, I am not here for it.
No, she and Steph would get along very well. Yes. And I'm just like, can you tell us just a little bit about Aunt Maggie? She's another character who I was very surprised by just how much I like, even though she's only on in a couple scenes, how much you feel for her in those scenes. And kind of like in a story that's so about like obviously black boys, black masculinity, then kind of her as their guardian figure, especially because she's not their mother, but she's obviously their guardian. And so kind of how do you navigate writing that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I really, really loved touching on in Slay was that how you can't out earn racism, right? So racism don't care if you drive a Maserati, you're still a black person driving a Maserati. And Mackie is an accomplished real estate agent. Like, she has it together. She has a 3-bedroom house in a gated community. Like, her face is on billboards. And she said she still feels some type of way when she gets pulled over. Like, it's still a life-threatening situation. And, she still feels judged when she goes out in public. She says people have assumed she's, a drug dealer or the spouse of a drug dealer or, what have you. And so she, among other reasons why she's in the book, she shows Alex that no matter with the present state of the world, no matter how hard you work, you will always be seen as black to the greater society. And that's a problem with the greater society, not a problem with us. Alex, for instance, takes his job incredibly seriously, like to a fault almost.
Yeah, his job at the ice cream parlor. I'm like, dude, you're like in high school. Yeah. It's an ice cream shop. It's okay.
It's not serious. Like, and his boss is basically like Latinx Mr. Krabs. Like, let's be real. He's like super toxic, and we can get into that. But Alex is working himself to the bone, taking his job super seriously to the point where it's hurting him. And not that there's no point. I mean, there's work ethic and everything, and there's merit in that. But to sacrifice your own mental health in favor of like success, questionable move. So Alex really has to grapple with that throughout the whole story and figure out a balance.
Definitely, yes. And so obviously this book is about seeing the future, seeing the past, but like it's still primarily a contemporary story. And I noticed you did this a lot with Slay too. Like, because Slay is primarily a contemporary, yet obviously the video game there brings in all these sci-fi elements and all this. And so is this something you kind of intentionally do, like kind of straddling that genre line and like writing books that can't be easily, this is a sci-fi, this is a contemporary, or like you just want to make everyone like difficult? Or is this just something you just found has been happening? Like, this just is what you're drawn to, and it tends to be books that kind of like bend those kind of genre lines?
I mean, I love making people's lives difficult. I'll be honest, I love stressing people out. With my books. But it's mostly been, I mean, I've always seen the world as like a super colorful place. Like, and I feel like with the experiences of Black people, our stories have been written so literally before with such realistic characters and like real experiences that we've been through. And with my books, I try to like take the reader out of that scenario and put them in a scenario so polarizing that the moral of the story is a little bit more obvious. And so that's what I did with The Cost of Knowing. I feel like I can't go much deeper into that answer without spoiling some things, but there's a whole lot of elements of Blackness and racism that I tackle through the lens of this this curse that the brothers have.
Yes. And it's just like, I think it's so fascinating because I feel like so many of us are like, we're so obsessed with like, what kind of book is this? And like, I love that you'll just say like, this boy works at ice cream shop and he sees the future. What about it? Like, there's just not an easy answer. Like, people want to say it's sci-fi. Like, even if you ask me, like I've seen, I think your publisher describes speculative fiction, and that makes a lot of sense because, like, you can even argue, is this the curse of fantasy thing? Is it a sci-fi thing? Like, what is it? And it's like, you can make a solid argument for either one. So, like, I think that's very, very cool. And I love, like, that idea of, like, you know what? Like, we don't have to make it so literal. We don't have to have it so on the page there. And then, so obviously this book is an emotional roller coaster of a book. And like Alex, like some of his depictions there of like how he experiences his anxiety and like just the way, like I text you this, like he is stressing me out. And like this is like, you know, I am one of the most anxious people. I also wrote a book about Black boys' anxiety and he was stressing me out, which is like how you know it's and so I kind of like, can you dive into that a little bit? Like, and specifically the actual writing of that, how did you kind of like stay true to that experience while also practicing self-care? Because like writing stuff like that can really just take a lot out of a person.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. I wish I could say I did a better job with self-care throughout the entire process of creating this book, but I really didn't. And I mean, I think I underestimated how much it would take out of me to produce this book, but writing it felt extremely cathartic. I was just kind of, you know, just manically pouring words onto the page. Just, I'm a fast drafter anyway, so getting this book out was like, get it out as soon as possible. Once the first draft was done, I was like, I can breathe. This is great. Send it to my editor, and then it came back, and I was like, oh God, I gotta look at this again. So when I opened it again and started editing and really started, you know, pulling things apart and weaving things back together, it took so much out of me. And then the pandemic hit, and so I was stuck inside for the past year and a couple of months here. And I was also pregnant at the time, found out it was a boy. So I've got all these thoughts swirling in my head about, you know, raising a little Black boy and writing this, you know, I call it an emotional wood chipper of a story while that was going on. And then just, I mean, there's a whole lot of emotion swirling. There's a whole lot of self-care not happening. I think the most I ever did for myself was like go for a walk and like drink water. But
okay,
if I had
maybe
to do it over again. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no. I was just gonna say try and do more than that next time. Because yeah, we need more than walks out here. But go ahead.
Right. I mean, usually my self-care routine includes like yoga, bike riding, like setting like a specific time of day to write, because if I'm just constantly thinking about the story, it's just, you know, but this time I just didn't do it. I mean, I was also, you know, I was working on editing this book, writing the Miles Morales book, and writing 2 video games. So not only did I overload myself, but then I wasn't like, you know, giving myself a break. I don't recommend it. Everyone who's watching, like, prioritize yourself, take care of yourself. Please don't do what I do.
And you were pregnant. And you were pregnant. I'm talking about that.
That too. I was 36 weeks pregnant painting these mountains on the wall. Like, I did everything wrong.
Stress me out so much. You're like, I read your updates and I'm like, I am stressed. Like, I feel like I need to message your editor like, I'm so stressed about this, Jen. You don't know me, but
oh man.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
And so
I mean,
now...
and then on top of that,
mm-hmm.
Oh, I was going to say, I actually have generalized anxiety, and a lot of like Alex's anxiety manifests the same way mine does. So yeah, cathartic in the beginning, and then like staring my own self in the face for a lot of the editing process. So yeah, That was all I wanted to add.
I'm always fascinated when you talk about your editing process because like we are very much opposites. Like I hate drafting so much. And it takes me a while to like actually do that first draft. And like once I have like a solid draft, like I actually love revisions because like for me, I feel like the book happens in revisions. Like I draft because if I don't draft, I have nothing to revise, but I hate it. I hate it so much. But gosh. And so
Yeah, I'm
obviously
opposite.
like, and I don't get it. I don't understand. But anyway, but so with this book, obviously, so it's been almost 2 years since Slay came out. Like, wow, what is time? How has it been almost 2 years since fall 2019? And so kind of going into this book, kind of what do you feel on the kind of two levels? Number one, you as like a writer, like your craft level, like what you understand about writing, what do you feel you've grown the most since then, like from that book to this one? And then you kind of like an author as a career, like as something you do, kind of like what going into the experience, how has it been like different? Minus the pandemic. Pandemic's the obvious answer. But like minus that, how has it been different? Like kind of what are you bringing into this that you feel you didn't have with you when you were going into Slay?
That's a great question. I feel like much of my actual writing process stayed the same. So I still give myself 24 hours to outline and then draft as fast as humanly possible. Did not go as fast as Slay. Slay was 11 days. This book was like a month and a half. So thank goodness I had a little bit of
like a month and a half. That's short. That's long. Gosh, stress.
Yeah. I mean, ask me how long it took me to edit. Like that's where that's the struggle for me. But yeah, so a lot of that part stayed the same. But in terms of like on the page, I think I did a lot. I think my skill in the voice department has matured. I feel like each character in this book had a much more unique voice than they did in Slay. And then I also feel like I played a lot more with I don't even know what to call them. There's a paragraph in the book that's written 3 times throughout the story. And the idea is that the more context you have around what's happening in that short little paragraph, it will sound different to you each time. And so then by the time you get to the end of the book, you will be thinking about that paragraph in a completely different context. And I love mind trips like that, where it's like, oh my gosh, I thought it was one way, but it's actually another way. I mean, I did that with Slay, but it was a little more like a very literal twist, like a very, by the book twist. This was still a twist, but a more unexpected one, which is kind of always the goal. So.
Yes. Ooh. And then on the second half of that question, what do you feel you like as an author in general? Like, what do you feel like you have now you didn't have when you were going into Slay, and like your understanding of like just everything? Explain everything.
I mean, I feel like just during the pandemic, I had a lot more of a cynical mindset about the world in a way. Like when I was writing Slay, I was, I was walking out of the theater after seeing Black Panther, and I was like, yes, Black power, this is amazing. Like being Black is a whole party. Like, we're all royalty and all of that. And then with The Cost of Knowing, I was just like, this is also hard sometimes. And that's fading as we come out of this. And I'll be right back to my, bouncy, jovial self with The Jump coming out. That's going to be another fun one. But yeah, this book was kind of a little bit of a dip in my emotions. And I think it felt good to go through that, honestly, and just get that out.
Definitely, yes. And so you mentioned The Jump a little bit, but like, can you tell us, what are you allowed to tell us that you're working on right now? Like,
I'm glad you asked. So I'm super excited about The Jump because it'll be my first multi-POV where all of the characters kind of are main characters. With Slay, it was just Kira and then the smaller voices. So a little bit of a different format. It also takes place in Seattle again, which I love that city. It's about cryptology, so digital scavenger hunting. It tackles classism, it tackles environmentalism and the intersection of the two. It features teens who don't take no for an answer and raise a middle finger to the status quo and all sorts of other cool stuff. If I execute this properly, or the way I'm hoping, there will be car chases, heists, daring escapes through the sewer. Like, who knows what's going to be in this book? I'm really, really excited.
When you say cryptology, I think cryptids. I'm like, wow, Brittany's writing a book about Bigfoot. Good for her. Like every time. Every time. Like you always explain that's not what cryptology is, and I completely forget it as soon as you say that. Would you write a book about good Bigfoot? Yes or no?
Would I write what?
Would you write a book about good Bigfoot though?
I would. It has to be the right context, but I would.
Write a romance, Bigfoot romance.
That's where I draw the line. Can't do it.
Not with that attitude, you can't. Not with that attitude. I'm going about to tweet everyone. Brittney Morris says Bigfoot romance can't be done. But and then okay. And also remember, y'all, drop your questions in the Q&A, please. We have I'm going to start transitioning to the Q&A questions. Y'all, you can, even as we're talking, you can keep dropping them in there, please. Do not let me keep asking Brittany questions. We're also going to keep talking about Bigfoot. Y'all don't want that. So we have a question.
I'd read a book about Bigfoot if you wrote it.
Ooh. It would be a romance though. I don't know if you want to watch. Like, I don't think you want to write a deep makeout scene with Bigfoot. I feel like I don't think you'd like that. There might be people who are into that.
Are you capable of writing a book without putting any romance in it?
Yes, actually, because my middle grade doesn't, because it's for younger readers. So I can, but it's I just love romance. Like for me personally, because I love romance subplots, it's something I gravitate towards. But if I don't have to, like with basically, I joke with my editor for Sarah, that's the name of the middle grade. Every time I would have put like a romance scene, I put a fart joke, and it's worked beautifully. So like, I've got even though there's not like a romance plot for her, there's definitely like a I really get to focus in on the family and the friendship. So like, there's still that deep emotional bond is like at the center of it, but it's just not a romantic bond. Because for me, romance is about the emotions. You know, like I love deeply emotional stuff. So like, as long as I can still get that, I'm happy. But I love it in romance. So we have a wonderful question from Daisy. Daisy said, "Hi, I haven't had a chance to read The Cost of Knowing yet. You can get on that, Daisy. But I'm curious about the title. Can you talk about that a bit? Can you please talk about the title?"
Yeah, so the title actually started out as The Curse of Knowledge, which is the name of a cognitive bias that happens when an expert in a field has trouble explaining to a novice how things work because they are so experienced. And the title changed to The Cost of Knowing because Alex can see into the future, so he knows what's going to happen. And Isaiah can see into the past, so he knows what happened in grave detail. And the book really at its core is about the toll it takes on our mental health, being flooded with from both of those extremes. So since the book is about that mental toll, The Cost of Knowing made a whole lot of sense. Did a lot of discussions with my editor about it, and that's the title that stuck. That's a great question, Daisy. Thank you.
And yet, really enough, it has the exact same initials as The Curse of Knowledge did. Funny how that worked out.
True.
Okay, let's see. We got some more questions coming in here. We got, good question from Katie G. Who would you invite to a superhero dinner party?
A superhero dinner party? I mean, Miles Morales is up at the top of the list.
I mean, but like, he
can
like
invite Chadwick. Can I invite Black Panther?
Yes, but I feel like the thing is, Miles like a 13-year-old boy. Like he's like Isaiah. He's gonna want like pizza pockets. Like I don't know if that's a dinner party. That's like a hangout. But like how are we defining dinner party? There's so many like variables to this question here. Like
that's true. I mean, the whole cast of Black Panther would make a pretty sophisticated dinner party. Like.
For me, you know what? I want to talk. You know who I want to hang out with? The X-Men. Because here's the thing about the X-Men. I always tell people this: the Avengers are like the Justice League. They're who you call if you want to get shit done. But like the X-Men are who you call when you want to talk shit. Like, can you imagine just like going out? Like they are so messy. The X-Men are always in each other's business, and honestly, 99% of the problems are caused by them. And like they're always like, "Yo, Professor X ain't shit," and like just hearing them all smack talk Wolverine, like it would be wonderful. So I would go to the dinner party with the X-Men person.
Oh my God. Introvert. So like hearing people talk all that stuff, I'm like, I'm just going to go to the bathroom for like 45 minutes and sit with my phone.
See, I really like it.
But like I would vibe with the Avengers.
You know, which Avengers though? Because I feel like the like the MCU Avengers, like I could see you, weirdly enough, I could see you getting along with Thor really well. I know that sounds weird, but you get along with Thor.
Actually, yeah, probably. I mean, the man's crazy about coffee, so yeah.
Yes. Okay. And we have another question from Daisy. Would you want to see the future?
absolutely not. I'm knowing the future. I feel like I would have way too much to think about. I have too much to think about as it is, just inventing problems. I would be a wreck if I could see the future. I'll pass.
Maybe not the way Isaiah does, because the way Isaiah, not Isaiah, sorry, Alex is the future brother, sorry. The way Alex does is stressful, especially because like Alex can't change anything. Like there's definitely versions out there, like unfortunately Endgame, where like if you change the future changes, you know? And so like maybe if it was the kind of power where like what you do changes things, maybe. But like his where it's like it's set, nothing you do is gonna change it anyway. I wouldn't want that because it's just like, why no, you know?
That's true.
There we go. Oh, we have and I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name here, Ferenc. Did you do any research on people who have psychic abilities and how they experience seeing future events?
I didn't do any research for this book specifically, but I do watch a lot of tarot YouTube. So I mean, I think that's about as close as I've gotten to people who, you know, can see the future, like diviners and all of that. But I mean, it did kind of come in handy because I got to write. I mean, the thing that often gets stressed with tarot is that they cannot change the future and they cannot predict a firm future. They can only give you hints and guidance from, you know, a higher power. And that's kind of what happens with Alex, where he, you know, he sees blatantly what's going to happen oftentimes, but there's no changing the future for him. There's no manipulating things. There's only the guidance that it provides. So I guess those run parallel.
Also, you know, I've been saying diviners my entire life, and you just said that diviners. I was just like, is that how that word's pronounced?
Is it diviners? You know what? I listened
to
Children of Blood and Bone, the audiobook, and in the audiobook, they say diviners. And so I've been saying diviners this whole time.
I don't know, because I've always said diviners, and now I'm stressed because I don't know.
Oh, crap. One of us is wrong.
Oh, gosh. Hope it's not me. But, okay, you know, we'll figure that out later.
Now.
I just constant stress. Okay, so we have a question here from Neil. Neil wants to know, what are your opinions on the balance of mental health and success? Do you think the most successful people have gotten that way by being able to push the limits or expand the limits of their own mental health? Wow, ooh, Neil, that's a heavy question. Good question, but ooh.
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh boy. Okay, so I guess we got to take a step back and define success, because that's different for everybody.
I guess if we're going to do standard markers of success here, in the sense of people who have reached a certain level of esteem / prestige within their chosen field. Like, I think if we're going to define success as that, and thus doing the necessary work to reach that level and also maintain that level of success, because it does take, like, having a certain level of awareness about you. It takes a certain level of you have to change the way you see the world. Let me put it like that. And the way the world interacts with you changes. Like, just when you reach a certain level where like there's people always watching you. So I think that's how I'm choosing to define success in this context. Is there anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote Slay, I was absolutely not thinking about my personal limits. I pushed myself way too far. But at a certain point, you do have to look at what's sustainable for you if you want to have a long, healthy, successful life. And you kind of have to stop caring to some degree what people think. At the beginning of my career, I would read all of my book reviews, all of them, every last one. I was checking Goodreads every day. Rosie was about to have my head over it. And you know what? After a certain, I know you warned me and everything. I didn't listen. At a certain point, I really had to just, you know, check out a Goodreads, just, you know, for my own health, and just start trimming things off and saying no to certain things. And I mean, it's about balance, right? Like, I would never tell people that to be successful, you have to push yourself beyond your limits, even though it can feel that way. And it can often be tempting if you are really gunning for success. But in all circumstances, I just encourage you to do what's sustainable and do what you can do, and not what you feel is expected of you. And to really think about how you define success, because it can be defined in more ways than just one.
Definitely, exactly. And just kind of jumping off that, like, kind of definitely I'm very fascinated by a part of your question that says people who have succeeded, have they been able to expand their limits or push their limits? I think part of it is there's just so many factors that go into people's success that we just don't know. Like especially, I'm just going to use publishing just because publishing is what we're both in. It's what we both know. Like even publishing, there's like it's not a meritocracy. It's not always like, oh, the best books are going to be the one that you're going to know about. Like there's just so many factors. And like, was the timing of the book? When did it come out? Was the house's budget when the book came out? What kind of did everybody suddenly care about vampires again? So suddenly the person who had a vampire book ready was just in the perfect spot. Like all sorts of factors go into it. And so a book that you could even see succeeding, it's not necessarily a good reflection of like, number one, how hard did the author work? Number two, how is their mental health doing with that? And so it can, so much of how we perceive other people's success can be through how we are perceiving where we ourselves are and kind of what it's just so, because there's just so much you just cannot know. And definitely, and I know for myself, like that kind of idea of expanding your limits, I don't think it's so much about expanding your limits as where it says working. It's kind of like just what Brittney said, like just working within a way that where your limits, like working in a way that honestly, like you said, sustainable. Because I know for me, that's definitely something I had to learn last year, pandemic. Like you can't go at 100% for an extended period of time without something has to give eventually. Like we are not set up to always give 100. Like I know last year I was just like my book was coming out debut. Like I had so much stuff to do. I'm just like I'm gonna go, and I crashed really hard last fall. And so I definitely from that experience.
You about that.
You were right about
like,
that.
Can
that
you not?
You were right. I definitely. And it's like I've definitely learned now. Like you know what? Even though during that period I technically was meeting like my stuff, I was technically doing what was being asked of me. I reached a point where it was just so like I was like I am breaking down doing this, like physically breaking down, not just like mental. And I'm just like you have to reach a point like you know what? To maintain the speed is asking too much of me. I can't do this. So like I don't think it's necessarily about expanding, just understanding like there are certain heights you can reach if you push yourself for a extended period of time, but it's not always worth it. It's not always what you need to do. And it's just like, it's sometimes, is this actually being asked of you or is this what you feel like is like you need to do to be where you are, you know? So I don't know if any of that made any sense, but that's a very broad, it's a good question. But
there's also an element of feeling like you need to, of feeling like you need to out achieve your trauma. Like for me personally, like there's a lot of trauma in my past and like for the top of the food chain in my writing career is like a really tempting way to decouple my life from the trauma that I've been through, and I'm constantly resisting the urge to do that. So that's a whole nother discussion.
We talk about that all the time. We also talk about curtains a lot, but we also talk about that all the time. Like just
we do.
Idea, like when you go through traumatic experiences, like this idea that like, oh, like part of coming trauma, 99% of the time when something traumatic happens to a person, it's usually because out of their control, right? It's a response happening that something so devastating that you had no control over happened. So like trying to regain control in any way you can is something so many traumatized people do, like a maladaptive coping mechanism. Like it feels good even though it's not actually good for you. And so you start to realize a lot of what you feel is like, oh, this is me getting on top of it. This is me pushing past my limits. This is me expanding. Is actually you trying to grasp for control in places where you literally cannot because it's physically impossible. So that's definitely, there's a layer of that as well. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question so we can try and get as many of these as we can. Cool. We have, another question from Katie. We have, as you mentioned, both of your books address anxiety and breaking the stigma of mental health. Is there any advice or things you learned while writing your characters? Ooh, things we learned while writing about anxiety and mental health. I guess for me,
you go first.
Content warnings on books are really good. Like if people like putting them out there, like I know there's a whole lot of discussion on it and like why certain authors are expected to do it and certain authors aren't, blah, 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 blah. Like rates, I included a content warning and I chose to do this. And I personally, simply because like, I just want to be like, look, y'all, the book gets into these kinds of things. I know these kind of topics can be triggering. If this is not something you're up to read right now, that's totally cool. Like I didn't want it to be like I don't want to have to pull back as an author. Like I never want to, because I also feel like I'm doing a disservice to the readers. Like if I'm going to talk about things like suicidal ideation, self-harm, like really like serious panic attacks, like I don't want to pull back because I'm too scared of triggering people. But at the same time, I want them to be aware so they can make this choice. Like, you know what? Sometimes you're just not in the headspace for that stuff. And that's totally okay. And like you have the right to make that choice. But like, because I know what it's like to be on the side of like reading a book and no one told you like there was a super graphic violence scene coming. You're just like, this is wonderful. I'm going to go cry in a bathtub. So like, I just kind of, yeah, with some of those heavy topics, I think I've definitely learned like, you know what, readers can handle more than you think, but it's also, there's nothing wrong with giving them the option to opt out, you know?
That's a very good answer. I feel like I mean, this was the first book I've written where I felt compelled to include trigger warnings. With Slay, not so much. With Together Apart, not at all. With Miles Morales, Wings of Fury, hardly anything. Cost of Knowing, it has like 15, I think. And I think, yeah, and I think with writing this book, I with delving into so many different reasons why mental health is so important in the Black community and how underserved we've been by, you know, by just discussions about mental health, and how excluded we've been, just it really solidified in my head the need for positive resources in our community, and you know, safe places where we can go, and you know, feeling free to talk about our feelings and our struggle, you know, feeling free to work through intergenerational trauma. And then, you know, I mean, just there are so many different topics that this book covers, and I feel like oftentimes, especially when young Black people try to talk about, you know, toxicity that's been passed down in generations in the Black community, it's shut down because you're being disrespectful and like not respecting your elders. And it's like, I don't know how we're expected to learn and grow if we're not allowed to talk about it. So I guess that's my answer.
Okay. Yes. Okay, and so we have a question here from Daisy again. What were your favorite or hardest scenes to write? And also, in honor of Alex's job, what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Ooh, love that. So my favorite scene has to be, there's a scene where Alex and Isaiah are sitting in the car, in Alex's car, and they're both rapping to the same artist.
Oh.
And they find out that they listen to the same artist, who is loosely inspired by Kendrick Lamar. I'm not gonna say he is inspired by Kendrick Lamar because I wrote the raps that he wrote, and I don't measure up to Kendrick. So loosely inspired with my lyrics. But yeah, just the joy in that scene, I just love it. And them connecting about what the songs mean and everything. There's a line in there where Alex says, that feeling in my heart that where I felt like I could fly just grew 50 times. And I felt that as I was writing it. So that was one of my favorite scenes. One of my least favorite scenes to write was actually chapter 1. It's heavy. That's the one where it really introduces Alex's anxiety. It talks about his job. It talks about, you know, how his boss treats him, just how hard it is working at that ice cream shop, and all of the thoughts that go through his head and just the anxious swirling that happens in his mind. And that was a tough chapter. I think I rewrote that chapter twice in the editing process. So that was a tough one. For ice cream flavors, I'm gonna go real bougie and like really, really specific on this one. There is an ice cream shop in Seattle called Molly Moon's, and they sell a seasonal flavor called, is it cornbread and honey? I think it's cornbread and honey. And it's like the most amazing ice cream flavor I've ever had. Second might be charcoal flavored ice cream, which sounds super wild. I know. It sounds ridiculous, but it tastes like a mild chocolate. It's really weird, but I really love it. Yeah, those are probably my.
Brittney, like we just had to fight now. Like when you said I rewrote it, like not to like downplay like the stress of that chapter and all that. But when you said I rewrote it 2 times, I was like, Brittney, we have to fight now because the number of times I've rewritten the first chapter. But the thing is, I'm a rewriter by nature, and so like if anything, and the thing is, I can't tinker. Like that's a big problem. So this is something I do myself. Like if there's like a paragraph off, I just start over. Like I cannot just go take that paragraph and fix it. I'm like, everything has to work as a cohesive unit. So I have to start over, make sure everything works. So it's my own fault. But also, I don't think there's any chapter in my books that I've rewritten less than 4 times. So
Oh my God.
I told you I'm a rewriter. That's just, it's part of why I take so long. But it's also, it's just how my brain works. Because trust me, I've tried to be like, look, you only know this line's the issue. And it's literally a thing that my editor has very lovingly called me out on, that like, Rosie, she's like, I need you, please, just this, like, just this sequence of like, just go in here. Everything else is fine. Just please, only this part. I'll be like, okay, Christian, I'll shut down all my instincts for you. I'll only touch this part. Because I'm just like, just because the way my brain works, everything is built based on the line before it, right? And so like, if I'm like if I'm changing one line, suddenly everything before it is not flowing to that line, you know? So it's like, I need to like make sure everything is flowing in an order, and like that's how I make for myself, how I make it feel cohesive. And so that lends itself
I'm totally
to like,
the opposite. My editor has sent me like a whole paragraph being like, and I love her editing letters too. She's great, but she'll send me like all of her notes, like all of her thoughts for like the first round, like the big edits, right? And she'll, I feel like the tone here throughout the first half is just kind of not really, gelling. It's not really conveying the message you want it to. Maybe we could da 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 or da 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 or da da da. And I'm like, what if we just added a paragraph that said this? And she was like, you know what? That could work. Like, very targeted, injectable changes. Always.
no.
It's very
I'm
rare that I have
literally,
to rewrite anything. Like the whole chapter, I mean.
I can't relate. You know that phrase, like, throw the baby out with the bathwater? That's literally me. I'll rip the entire bathtub out and chuck it all. So, okay, so we're getting to the end here. And so, like, the
God.
most important question that has been most important to talk about: why are you so wrong about the fact that Peppa Pig cannot fight? Okay, context for y'all. Me and Brittney have had this fight going for like 2 years now, and neither of us are refusing to back down on this because I'm right. Basically, I believe that Peppa Pig could beat Arthur in a fist fight. Like, just hands, no weapons, no one else is allowed. He can't tag in DW. Like, they're just fighting. Peppa Pig would win.
Lies. Straight up gangster.
Why?
Look,
what?
I was actually going to confront you about this because I noticed suspiciously, like very ridiculously, your whole tone about this whole discussion got real quiet after this video dropped of Arthur threatening to sell DW over a 3-legged race. Like, Arthur is not here to play. He is done.
I don't even remember that video. I never even saw that.
He would straight up lay out Peppa Pig, okay?
Did you not see Peppa Pig hung up on her own friend when she was like, oh, you can't whistle? She just hung her up. Peppa does not make friends. She only has enemies. Peppa just walks up and it's just on sight. Peppa would not hold back. And Arthur like,
Peppa Pig is passive aggressive. Arthur's most famous meme is literally just his fist, and people just know. Like, Arthur's straight up aggressive. Peppa Pig is passive aggressive.
But he doesn't have strategy. Peppa would bring the strategy in there, and he just does not have that.
Give an example of Peppa's strategy, though. She like spontaneously hung up the phone. Please give me an example.
You know what? I'm going to go through the Peppa Pig library, and I will send you an example. I will find one. I can't think of one now, but there's one. But no, Peppa Pig.
I'll be waiting.
If y'all have any, yes. And then I see Leah coming back up here, so thank you. Just one last thing. I'm just so honored to be here with you, Brittney. Thank you. You've written such an amazing book, and it's just, I'm so happy to see this Black kids everywhere. No Smark. I'm just so glad to have you in my life. I'm so honored to be here with you, and I just cannot wait to see where this book and where you and your career are going to continue to go, even though you're still wrong about Peppa.
You know what? Thank you so much, Rosie. I've had a great time today. Talk to you, and thank you, Leah, and everyone at Politics and Prose. Just gonna leave y'all with this. Rave gloves come into the book at some point. Watch for them.
Always a party.
Why?
Off the screen.
Thank you so much, guys.
I love them.
Thank you both so much. Before we leave, I always like to end with one more question too. If you guys want to share any what you're working on next, so we can get excited for your next title. What are you guys working on next? What else are we going to look forward to from both of you?
Brittney's writing Bigfoot romance.
Yeah.
Everyone will tell everyone that.
Lies. Greatly exaggerated. So I am working on my next jump, which is about 4 Seattle teens who join a cryptology contest to win influence and resources that they're going to use to take down an oil refinery going up in their neighborhood. So I'm my goal with this book is to make it my most action-packed story yet. So I'm very, very excited for this one.
Oh, so excited.
And
Rosie?
for me, I'm finished. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
For me, I'm finishing up A Psalm of Storms and Silence, which is the sequel to A Song of Race and Ruin. And that title is very hard to say, so no one feel bad at like having a hard time saying it. And I'm also finishing up my middle grade debut, Serwa Boting's Guide to Vampire Hunting. And so that'll be out next year with Rick Riordan Presents. And I'm also finishing up a graphic novel for Marvel about Shuri's Black Panther. No title or cover artist for that yet. We're going to be announcing all that soon. But like, yeah, very busy over here these days. Lots of crying in the DMs.
My gosh, from both of you, I'm so excited. Oh, so much to be excited for. But thank you both so much already for everything you've given and all your discussions. But sadly, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you both so much for your great questions and contributions. And of course, many thanks to Brittney and Roseanne for joining us this evening and sharing your stories and insights. And as you said, Brittney, in your post today, I just want to throw the thanks back at you. Thank you so much for continuing to spin your amazing words into these awesome worlds. So thank you, of course. And of course, thank you, viewers, for joining us today. Don't forget.
Thank you.
Yes. Don't forget, of course, thank you by grabbing a copy of this book. You can still click on the chat box if you don't have one yet. Get a copy of The Cost of Knowing, as well as if you haven't read Rosie's awesome book, A Song of Race and Ruin, so you can be ready for the second installment. You can get one there. Also, to find out about more events, check out our website for updated listings, and you can follow us on our kids and teen department in our social media, and we'll drop that information in the chat box as well. So you can see our past events. And also, thank you so much again, everyone. You keep reading widely, expanding your world, and exploring new ones, and sharing your stories. So important. Stay safe, and thank you all so much again.